Thanks, Rex. Again. Pick one. Thanks, you.
I mean,
all right.
You could just add an extra. Chairs and Thank you.
This is nice and cozy. We're all fitting in
cold weather.
Yeah, cold weather. Yeah, stay warm. Well, thanks for coming tonight, everyone. We'll get started for July CocoaHeads. Firstly, sorry about the delay. As you might have realised, had some technical difficulties. Christian's not here tonight, so I tend to rely on him a lot, and that was obvious. But we're all good now. We're live on YouTube, and everything's working. So let's get stuck in for the meetup. So to begin with, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So I'll do just a few minutes of housekeeping, and then we'll get stuck into the talk. Stuck into the talk for the night. So hey, I'm Zach. Normally Christian helps me run it, as I have mentioned, but tonight's just me. So any issues, questions, or concerns throughout the night, come and speak to me, please. We have a code of conduct that applies to CocoaHeads, the meetup, as well as all online things like the Slack as well. Just a reminder to be respectful, be inclusive, and be aware of fellow attendees. And if there's any issues related to this, again, come and speak to me. So a massive thank you to our sponsors, Billu. Obviously, Billu provides the venue. We're in their awesome offices right now, and Procreate help out with our costs as well, things like the food. So Procreate are a relatively new sponsor, and they're going to be sharing a little bit more meetup later in the year. I believe we're going to have some talks from them, which that should be super exciting. But for now, what you need to know is that Procreate is expanding their team to Sydney. So previously they've been Hobart only, and I believe it's imminent later this year, definitely. They're coming to Sydney, which should be super cool, and they'll have some job postings as well to look out for. So we'll have more to say about that partnership in the coming months as well. If you're not in the Slack group already, feel free to scan that QR code and join. It's a place with lots of iOS developers from all around Australia and New Zealand. Good place to ask questions or just have a chat about the latest betas or whatever's happening in Apple land that month. We have a dedicated Sydney channel, which I'd recommend you join. I usually just post announcements in there, so things like when the meetup's announced, you'll get all the details there, as well as things like whatever. I mentioned, we are live on YouTube. Camera's just up there, but that's all good. Okay, anyone attending for the first time? Show of hands. Welcome. Great to have you here. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for coming. A bit of a shout out for some conferences and events that are coming up. So DevWorld, you might be aware, that's, as far as I know, the only kind of major iOS conference in Australia. That's happening early September. It's a really good conference. If you can get down to Melbourne for it, I strongly recommend doing so. And tickets are on sale now. So I think last month I mentioned that the call for presentations was closing up, and now that's happened, and we're onto the ticket sales part of DevWorld. So they have a website, and it's devworld.au, or you can Google it. But definitely recommend checking that out if you're interested. Apple is also running some liquid glass and foundation model workshops, so you can find out all the details on the developer page. I think you can just Google like Apple developer events and it will come up. But there's a session in Sydney and a session in Melbourne for both topics. Again, if you're interested in that, or you know someone who might be, you can send them that link and they can check it out. Those sessions are usually quite informative, quite a good day. And then, of course, you've got Melbourne CocoaHeads. So if you like what you see here tonight, I strongly recommend checking out Melbourne CocoaHeads as well. They run a lot like us. They're on the second Thursday of the month, and they also have a live stream, so you can watch it from afar as well. Is anyone hiring or looking for work and wants to give a plug or a shout out for something? Smaller crowd tonight.
Looking, not hiring.
Looking, yeah. Do you want to say anything? You're looking for anything particular, or?
Looking for some kind of tech lead staff engineer. Yeah, I'm in IIS field from the very beginning of IIS. So pretty much all the time hands-on. So yeah.
Cool. You know who to talk to in break if you're hiring. And looking ahead, next month's meetup is on the 21st of August. We should be here. As usual, I'll post the full details on meetup and Slack a bit closer to the event. But we are still looking for speakers. And at this point, we don't have any presentations lined up. So if speaking is something you want to do, or want to give it a try, this might be a good month to give it a go. Just feel free to talk to me tonight or send me a message on Slack or Meetup or anything. Happy to workshop ideas with you if you're not sure what you want to talk about. And also if you've submitted a talk for DevWorld and you kind of want to give it a trial run a few weeks before DevWorld, it's also a good opportunity to do that. I've done that before, and it makes the DevWorld talk even better because you kind of know what works and what doesn't work by doing the trial run at CocoaHeads. So yeah, please get in touch. All right, that's all my rambling. So tonight's schedule, we have one talk, and then there'll just be an opportunity to hang out and continue socializing if you like. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Boaz.
Hey everyone, I'm Balázs, one of the iOS devs here at Vilu, and I will be talking about Dry July with Swift testing. Now, Dry July is an admirable undertaking, and I genuinely respect anyone who takes on that challenge, but I would rather focus on dry's coding aspects all around the year. And I know that topic testing is a bit dry. I'll try to make it a bit more engaging, but no promises. So as I said, today we will explore how can we write drier tests with Swift testing. Let's dive into it a little bit. First, let's talk. I think all of us are aware of what dry means, but of course, it's something that we tend to not really follow in the test suite, right? And sometimes even regret it a little bit. Of course, with our current tools or our old tools, XCTest, or all the frameworks, it's not that easy to keep the test dry, but still easy to write, easy to understand, easy to read, right? But
sorry.
That's all right.
Thank you so much.
That's all right. But with Swift testing, actually, there are some options that we can utilize. Let's talk a bit about Swift testing first. So this is Apple's modern unit testing framework, right? That was introduced in WW24. And I was amazed when I saw the videos about it. It was really cool. Honestly, I didn't have much exposure to other testing frameworks other than XCTest and Nimble. But what I saw, I really liked. But it's not meant to replace XCTest immediately, right? I mean, XCTest case, we can. We don't have any option for replacing the UI testing yet. I hope it's coming as well. But still, it's a really nice step and shows where Apple is heading to. It's completely built in Swift, taking advantages of all the modern features of Swift. And obviously, one of the biggest improvements, the part that I will focus on, is the parameterized tests. There is a little cheat sheet for comparison to XCTest. Obviously, like the structure changed a little bit. We are utilizing macros instead of the methods, and we don't have to subclass XCTest test case anymore. We have the new macro for replacing the assertions, the except macro, which simplifies things a little bit. Actually, when I first saw it in code, without seeing the console itself, I was a bit scared. Like, okay, we are ditching all the assert equal, assert nil, assert not nil, and we are replacing it with a simple Boolean result. How will that work? But we'll see that it actually works pretty well. And also, obviously, like they had to replace all the XCT unwrap, the XCT fail, and all that. And when we look at the parameterization, XCTest could manage parameterized tests in a way, but it wasn't easy. It will be much more easier with Swift testing. To see it in action, obviously we all saw this, right? It's a very simplified thing, but we have a certain code snippet that we use to assert things, right? To get all the values that we want to compare for and assert about. And then sometimes it's much easier to just copy and paste and change that input value, change the expectation if it's needed. And yeah, it's all good, right? It's just test code. But then once something changes in the logic and we have to go through all of those cases and change everything, it becomes a hassle. Now we can do much better with Swift testing, obviously. So basically we have this test macro, test macro, where we can provide arguments. And those arguments are ran as separate test cases, but still on the same code, which is, yes, it's much drier, right? And that can replace our previously repeated tests. We can, for example, if we take the previous example where we had valid and invalid email checks, we can keep them separate, or even we can go further and use multiple parameters to pass in and merge them into one. Now for that, we have two options. We can either define an array of tuples for multiple parameters, or even we can zip it. Zip two arrays, or yeah, so build up our own, because again, that results in a tuple, an array of tuples again. But there are all the options that's available in Swift for that. Honestly, it's possible with zip. I didn't find a good use case for it yet, because honestly, it's not as readable, right? With a tuple, at least you see the whole input in one row, if you are, or in one block, and that gives you some clarity. Most of the time. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So let's see all this in action. Let me switch over. So basically, I'm starting off not from exit test because I didn't want to go through all that migration. Again, a bit more on that later. But basically, we have all these nicely repeated tests for checking emails and then checking accesses. You see, as I scroll down all the way down, it's quite much, right? Even in the minimap, you see the pattern emerging. It's obviously repeated code, so obviously not dry enough. Now, instead of that, if I turn all that off, we can merge that all into 3 test cases, basically. Or obviously we can go further as well, but we'll see that there are some issues. First of all, it's really readable and understandable when it's obvious from your input what's gonna happen, right? But if I run this suit, I hope I commented correctly. And we look at the, oh, it's really big. If you look at the console output, so the valid email, that's quite understandable, right? Test valid emails recorded an issue, email being invalid email without @sign.com. Yeah, obviously, that's a failure. We understand what went wrong, right? Our expectation was incorrect. But if we take a look at the other test case where we had a series of inputs in tuples, where it's not really obvious what's going to happen, that error is not as clear-cut. Like, yes, we passed in all of these, and then, yes, the has access was supposed to be true. It was true, but it was supposed to be false. It's not that clear. Also, in the test navigator, it's not that clear-cut what's going to happen, right? And you don't really know, especially from a CI, what went wrong. For that, we can, obviously, we have lots of options to make it a bit clearer. We can pass in some description that we won't actually use in our test case. It's just there to show as an input. Or we can even use the description in the test case. But there is another way. So if instead we simply use, and internal enum as test data, we can provide our description as the test case name. So we will know what's supposed to happen. And then we can provide that whole long tuple as an argument for each case. And even our test definition became much nicer, much cleaner, right? Permission test data dot all cases. Yes, that's what we are testing. We just destructuring the arguments, and the rest of the test code is unchanged. Now when I run this, so this one failed. Where is it? Here. Initially, one argument, moderator can access moderation tools. So if we use a descriptive case name, we will know exactly which test failed. So we got back to the trackability of the first repeated code, but still we don't have duplicates. Adding new cases is pretty easy. You don't need to copy and paste again. You just add the new entry in the test data as a case, and you provide the arguments. It's pretty clear-cut. Also, providing a long tuple, we know it's not a good idea, right? But it works, but it can get messy. But if you provide labels as well, then it's way more understandable what is supposed to happen. You won't get confused by the multiple booleans or strings, which goes where. And and it's still readable. Like once you gather all the context months later of, okay, what am I passing in? It's really understandable how each argument is built up. There is one more thing I want to call attention to is how we use inputs in the expectations. For example, right now, if we take a look at how the email one is built, so we are calling a method in there, in whichever way, with obviously just the variable names. But then Swift testing is smart enough to actually print out the actual values as well. So basically, we are passing in an email, but it also tells us, yes, by the way, that email's value is this, right? If we take a look at our other test case, which is here, unfortunately, we only see here has access true, expected access false, right? It's not that descriptive. But if we can do that, and obviously this heavily depends on the test code itself or the logic that you need to apply, we can even make it a bit more readable in certain cases. Because now it gives us back the whole code that was running in the expectation. And that, again, makes it more understandable from a CI perspective. Then you need to check out, oh, what went wrong?
The only thing, like it would be nice if it then said for each of the variables what the value was. Like it does it kind of at the end
Yes.
for the result.
Yes, true. But at least you have,
Yeah.
from a CI perspective, you have got some context on, okay, what was this actually comparing?
Yeah.
And that's also another advice, that wherever you can, don't create the Boolean beforehand the expectations, but create the Boolean comparison, or put the code that creates the Boolean within the expectation, because at least some context can be retained. So obviously there are probably there are better ways to organize your tests, or different ways that still work good. But this is how I ended up in my journey when I started working with Swift testing, and I faced all these, I have a huge tuple, I don't understand what's going on. So that's where I ended up doing. Let's get back to the slides.
One question with the expect, can you still give it like your own description? Like
Yes. So you can still give a description if needed. It's just you can get away without it if you organize your code in a certain way.
Yeah.
So my best practice is with Swift testing so far. For simple test cases, you can use just an array as the arguments if they are descriptive enough to understand what's going on. If you have more complex test cases with multiple inputs where it's not easy to manage and not clear what's happening, you can go with the enum approach. When you are going with the enum approach, definitely give meaningful names. Utilize it. Obviously, that's like kind of throwaway data in a certain way because it doesn't have to be an enum, but at least in this way, it can provide you some clarity on the tests. Keep argument lists focused and relevant to one behavior. Still, even though you can go crazy, don't. Keep it simple. Keep it just for the minimum for that one test case, one behavior.
Just one test.
Don't use the cryptic tuple arrays. As I said, the readability and the understandability suffers. Don't mix unrelated test scenarios. It can get really ugly really quick. And again, this is just a tool. You don't have to parameterize everything. If some edge case doesn't fit in with that parameterized test, it's completely okay to create a new test case for it. Now about migration. As I mentioned before, exit test and Swift testing can coexist within the same test target. Mixing them up is possible, but again, I would be probably careful about that. So when you get to a test suite or test class that you would want to parameterize, it's probably better to migrate the whole thing and then get done with it. How can you adopt it gradually? Obviously, new tests, why not in Swift testing, right? New features, all good. Existing tests, especially if you stumble upon some code repetition and you need to update it, then it's probably a good time to migrate. Obviously, paying attention to do it gradually so you are still testing it all the way that you don't introduce anything. Obviously, there are some clear-cut cases. Yes, it's the same code. Let's just use the first one and we are done. There are some migration tools available. There is one called Swift Testing Revolutionary, which is a Swift syntax-based migration tool. So it looks pretty solid. Unfortunately, I couldn't use it because we were also using Nimble and it's not prepared for that. If you have third-party frameworks as well, like Nimble or Quick, then you can write your own custom script if you want. I ended up doing that first with regex, which I managed to do for like a 90% completion, and then the rest was quite easy to migrate over. Or you can write your own Swift syntax-based one, which is obviously, it can handle better the different code formatting, but it's more complex to write. And the third, I don't know if you see the little bit of separation there. You can also use AI coding assistants. Just be careful, they hallucinate. Make sure that the actual assertions didn't change. So let's wrap up with some key takeaways. Drive principle should be followed in test code as well, if you can. So eliminate repetitive test code patterns because you will suffer. You will thank yourself later. You will suffer if you. Swift testing is a modern testing framework with superior parameterization. Sorry. I really enjoy working with it. Simple vs complex. When you are looking at a test case, take a look at the inputs and decide, can I go with the simple way or do I need to create my own test data to make it clearer? And then gradual migration, you don't have to do everything at once, but it's better to start on it with new tests because this is where we are heading. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, please feel free.
one which isn't directly to your actual talk, but it's relevant, I think, is what tools do you find useful to judge what your test coverage is? I know what we use, but what have you found good or not so good, or?
The sad truth is that in the current project, there are no tools.
Oh.
I mean, we started to implement it. It is running on our release PRs. We don't do anything about it. But it's a little bit on the reviewers and on the developers themselves to decide what is a good coverage. Fortunately, we have good developers who have good judgment. That's my opinion. So I think we still have pretty good coverage, like meaningful coverage. And that's what I saw in a previous project, that when it was running, not danger, I don't know, it was running some code coverage tool. The good developers still had to think about, okay, how do I structure my tests to be meaningful? The lazy ones were still just gunning for, okay, I have to take this percentage, and there were lots of unmeaningful tests.
Yeah.
So,
But after all, how much coverage you have?
I don't know. I didn't check it.
Just check it.
Isn't there like a setting in Xcode where?
Yeah, you could,
Yeah,
that's the
those
problem is
numbers are bonkers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now
Completely
also,
bonkers.
Right.
part of the story is that it has an enormous amount of legacy code that is actually being decommissioned as we go on. So that will have some poor coverage for sure. I think our current one is pretty high.
Have you used any AI tools to help you convert to Swift testing?
Yes. Yeah, I
How'd it
did.
go? Like, what did you find?
So I used GitHub Copilot with the Xcode extension. And when I told it what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, provided some examples as context, it was doing all right. Unfortunately, what's missing from the extension is the context window. I was hoping that if I define at the beginning of the chat what I wanted to do, then it stays in the chat as long as it goes. The first 2 or 3 were good enough, and after that it started to deteriorate. And after a while, it was either I go back to my regex, which is doing 90% all good, or I copy in every time all the instructions. So yeah.
You have a question?
I was about to ask about the linking, because you're putting rules there, best practices, let's say.
Yes.
And do you have any linking solutions
No.
for tests?
No, not really. I mean, we don't use anything. Probably there are some available linting rules that we could enable, but on the project where I'm doing this, we are only using Swift format, not Swift link.
I noticed you had your arguments, and then you had an at test, and then your function underneath. Is that something how you like to do your test,
No,
or could you put your arguments at the top and have a whole bunch of
Yes,
different cases?
you can structure it as the way you like it. Actually, I don't really know why I left it on top. Usually, I like to put it below the test method.
Okay.
So first you see the test method, you see what's going to happen, and then you can check the data if you want.
Okay, can you share the data between multiple tests?
You can. It's an enum.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
based on where you put it, it can be accessible this way, that way, other way. If you need to share the data, I would be careful, because either you are still need to repeat some code because you have different expectations from the same data. So that would be again 90% the same code, but then here you're expecting true and here you are expecting false, or you need to create one test data set for a test case. That was my experience.
You could use it for say here's my user, groups of different types of users, and then you have tests which test different access. For this they can access it like this other thing, all of that group shouldn't access it. Maybe like some other property on them. I guess
Yeah, now, again, you can go, so whatever fits your use case is the best way,
Yeah.
right? So I had some tests where I was sharing data, but then that test data didn't contain the expectations.
Yeah.
So in that way, yes, you can. But then at the point that you also have to include expectations or any additional, like in some cases, it might not have been the best. I even included some specific expectation for that use case as a closure. Because there were some differences in it, but the actual prep code was so big that I was like, nah, I don't want to repeat this one.
Do you know if it's possible to do like a permutated matrix?
What do you mean?
Like a test within a test? Like you want like a test which is parameterized, but then another test?
That's being called. Yes, I think you can.
Because then you can like do a combination.
Yes,
like,
yes. Yeah, that's what I meant when I said that I was including closures in the test data that was being run and checked. So
So it works like in GitHub Actions with like a matrix of like for here's all the for Windows or like for each my operating system, then for each Xcode, kind of make sure you kind of for each cross product you run a test.
Yeah, I think you could. It's just again, how complex do you make your data? Right. So it's always a balance of.
Or would you have a single ad test, or would you have?
No. I would definitely have multiple ad tests. So that's like, still keep it simple.
Okay.
Because later on when you go back, you need to understand and be able to confidently modify it.
Okay.
So one question on the parallel testing, right? Like I was just facing this right now. So when you implement it, because these are by default parallelized, right?
Yes.
So when they're parallelized, like I was trying to test my, let's say, presenter, and I was trying to run the test, but what is, even though I do the init, in every init I try to initialize it, but somehow if I run this parallel mode is they're failing.
Yep.
Because of the, I'm not sure, from somehow.
No, it is by default parallelized, the Swift tests. Actually, that's what gives it superior performance over exit test. But you can serialize them. You can use the suit traits.
Being parallel, I'm not sure. For some reason, they're failing even. I was trying to kind of construct them in the function method. Like every test, I try to initialize my presenter and try to somehow the context is written. I don't know where.
So what I've noticed is when you go parallel, if you have any singletons,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
that's when it falls over.
Yeah.
Because then it's running within the same instance, right? So the
Yeah.
singleton just kind of steps on itself.
It's not parallel by default.
It is.
It's parallel by default.
It is parallel.
Causing you
The
trouble.
end.
Parallel by default.
Okay. Get into a race condition.
Yeah, I'm not sure because my individual tests were running passing fine, and when I run them in combination, they were failing. And then I was switched to the serialized one and started passing.
Yeah, I mean that's always an option if you. But yeah, as Sushan mentioned, it's usually when somewhere in your unit you're using a shared
Unit.
instance or a singleton or something that.
Yeah, I didn't have time to dig down all those things. Yeah.
All right, another round of applause. Thank you.
You don't need it.
No, just disconnect. That was awesome.
No, I didn't want to stay.
Fairly sure that's not the Indian Ocean.
Oh, that's good.
Right.
No, this is that.
All right, well, that's all we have for you tonight, so thanks for coming. Feel free to stick around for a bit if you want to have a chat. There's a bit more pizza and still some drinks in the fridge, but otherwise get home safely and we'll catch you next month. Thank you. Sorry to drop the stuff. No, it's okay. I know.
Right, SDK.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
What do you mean? What are they for?
Right, so
Sorry, I just got the
IBM.
and I'll come and talk to you. Sorry.